answering your questions. So please put them in the chat because it's going to be a first come, first in the chat, first answered basis. So now let's move into creating that amazing week for ourselves with all the health topics that we're going to cover today. And there are a lot of them. So I have to bring on Miss Lila Mays and Mr. Wayne Bruce, my people with their ear to the ground, who are going to help me bring all this information to you tonight. My wonderful co-producers, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hey.
It's been a little hectic today. We came on late, Dr. Mel. I'm just gonna let you know. We came on late.
We are here now, and that is all that matters.
They missed your whole beginning speech, but go check it on. It won't even be on replay, but go find it. We'll put it up in the rebroadcast.
Well, the most important thing is that I'm welcoming my Be Health Empowered family and thanking them for joining us again this week.
Yes,
and I hope they got that you are Mr. Wayne Bruce, and that we also have Miss Lila Mays, who are going to help walk us through tonight's show, which is going to be amazing.
Amazing. You ready? Everybody ready?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move into the weekly recap.
Well, hold on.
Why y'all stop me all the time? Why y'all don't tell me this before the show?
Because you're supposed to know.
I'm Ready Ranger here. I'm going forward.
You have to let everybody know what our topic for the show tonight is.
Well, men don't. Men and dads don't like to talk about the topic tonight.
well,
y'all need to know.
Y'all need to know. That's right.
It's
because
it's meant for us.
It's Women's Health Month.
It is.
So, yeah. And so that's what we're talking about tonight. We're celebrating our sexual health as women. So,
yes.
I know men might throw in some questions about yourselves, but it's not about you tonight. It is all about my queens out there making sure that we're clear about how our bodies work, so we can make informed decisions about our sexual health. And our young women, especially, are often operating on misinformation. So we're going to be clearing all of that up tonight.
Oh, I'm down then. I mean, I'm down for it. Okay. I want to know how to talk to, my nieces and everything about.
Yes.
I have the talk. Well, we run away from men run away from those things. We do.
Right. So I think it's important that everybody feels comfortable answering questions when the time is appropriate.
Indeed.
So, all right.
Can we go to the recap now?
Yes, we can.
I mean, it's week 3. All right, let's go. The recap. Here we go. What we got today, Dr. Mel? We're going to kick them off with the numbers, right?
Yep. People are still saying COVID is over. I actually went to a restaurant, asked about being seated outdoors. They said, oh, we don't do outdoor seating now that COVID is over.
Thanks for telling us.
Right, exactly. So we're still having about 35,000 new cases of COVID a day, adding to the 80 plus million cases we already have. And it's important to keep in mind this week that every home in the United States is eligible to order 2 sets of 4 free at-home COVID tests. So if you already ordered your first set, you can get your second set. If you didn't order it the first time around, you can order 2 sets. So that's 8 tests altogether. Just go to covidtest.gov, put that in, order your tests, get it sent to your home. So that's, making sure that we're staying on top of testing. Hospitalizations are the lowest that they've been since July of 2021. That's fantastic news. And deaths still hovering between 1,000 and 1,200 deaths a day, still a lot. And they're not seeming to drop as sharply yet as the cases and the hospitalizations. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that brings us to Facts. So how are we looking?
Kind of flat. I mean, It was
Yeah.
69.2% of everybody over 5 vaccinated last week. This week it's 69.4%. So it's inching up, but pretty slow. I think it's because people
But
don't
yeah.
feel that urgency anymore, right? You know,
Right.
but honestly, now's the best time to get vaccinated if you haven't, because you could catch up on your series. You can go out without, less of a risk of encountering somebody with COVID since the numbers are coming down, but you could be
Mhm.
prepared just in case another variant pops up. So now's a great time to go ahead and get vaccinated.
I agree with
Okay. All right. Those are the numbers. Let's move on to this COVID test to treat program. Break it down for us, Dr. Mill.
Well, had you heard anything about it before
I
today, Lila?
hadn't, but I've been in a bubble for the last 5 days, so I hadn't heard
Okay.
anything about it.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, President Biden announced it in his State of the Union speech that there would be this COVID-19 test to treat program. And now it's about to be up and running. So basically, it's pharmacies that have clinics. You can go in, get tested, and if you test positive, you can pick up medication right there on the spot. Those antivirals, one is called Paxlovid, the other called Molnupiravir. You could pick those up right there at the same place that you get tested if you test positive. Take those. It's really important that you take them within 5 days of symptoms, showing up, because that's when they'll work. It's a 5-day course of medication, and it is overwhelmingly shown, especially Paxlovid, to keep people out of the hospital.
All right.
So that's something to look for, and you have to be 12 or over to take those medications. So,
Okay.
um,
Okay.
yeah.
So if you see any 11-year-olds walking into the pharmacy, stop them.
Well, it's 12 years old or 88 pounds.
All right.
So, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, number 3, eek. Worldwide dementia rate expected to go up. That is scary.
Yeah. Due to COVID. I mean,
Yeah.
so there was a study that was done that showed that older adults who were hospitalized with COVID continue to experience cognitive impairment a year after they were sick, suggesting that COVID-19 may be causing long-lasting damage to cognition and set many more people up for dementia. So they looked at 1,400 people who had survived COVID, age 60 and over.
Mhm.
12.5% of them had problems with thinking and memory a year later, and it went up to 1 in 5 of them if they had had severe COVID. So that's why the researchers are basically saying that the pandemic may contribute to rates of dementia going up worldwide, because we know the millions and millions and millions of people who've had COVID worldwide.
Okay, wow.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so we sprung forward this week, right?
We did.
Indeed.
Over the weekend.
Daylight savings time.
Yep, I know a lot of people are probably still trying to get it
You
together.
still trying to catch up live? Did it
I
catch
know
you
I
short?
am.
You had a long weekend, red carpets and
Yes.
everything. It that 1 hour made a difference.
It is whooping my tail. Yes.
So
Yes.
tell us about the health risk of daylight savings time.
Well,
Dr. Mel.
Lila, you're not alone. It's whipping a lot of people's tail,
I know.
right?
Yes.
So this one study, and this is not new information. We've known this for a long
Mhm.
time, that around immediately following daylight savings time, the rate of emergency department visits go up. There are increased risks for atrial fibrillation, which is, a heart condition, depression, heart attack, strokes, suicide, all immediately following daylight savings time. One
Hmm.
study in 2014 found that the risk of having a heart attack the Monday after springing forward, so that's today, was about 25% higher than other Mondays throughout the year. And fatal
That
car
is
crashes,
bananas.
isn't that crazy? And fatal car
Yeah.
crashes went up by 6%. So
Hmm.
what's basically happening is our internal body clock is having a hard time adjusting. Our hormone levels get thrown off, our circadian rhythms get thrown off, even our blood pressure gets thrown off. So, what everybody can do to sort of cut their risk is start exposing yourself to sunlight as early in the day as possible. So, try to get up early. And then, about an hour before it's time to go to bed, decrease your light exposure, turn the lights down in your house, dim them, and all that. And that'll help you sort of adjust and maintain that sleep wake cycle.
Okay.
That's good advice, because
Yeah.
when you start messing with the circadians outside.
No.
Oh, we talk
He's so
circadians.
Yeah, and
silly.
It's what I
especially you
do, folks. It's
musicians,
what I do.
especially you musicians that like to keep late hours. It's a
Yes.
good idea around
Exactly.
daylight savings time to,
Yes,
go to
it's the
bed in a
worst.
timely manner and turn the lights down.
It's the worst. It's
Yeah.
the worst. So look, I got a few friends who tried to kick cigarettes by smoking e-cigarettes. Now we have a link to pre-diabetes.
Wow.
Yeah, not good news. And it's been put out there that e-cigarettes are, harmless. You don't have to worry about them. And we're seeing the prevalence of e-cigarette usage going up, especially among young people. But according to this analysis of over 600,000 people, it seems to be linked, e-cigarette use seems to be linked to a 20% higher chance of developing prediabetes.
Wow.
Yeah, so even former e-cigarette smokers had a lower but still higher risk of developing prediabetes. So it's a real thing that if you think that e-cigarettes are harmless, you might want to rethink that. Anytime you're putting something smoke in your lungs, especially if it has nicotine in it, it's not going to turn out well.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you know what time it is. We finished the recap. What can I do it?
What time is it, Wayne? Go ahead.
What time is it?
The weekly debunk. Stopping misinformation in its tracks.
So, Dr. Mel, I got this text from Tony Twitterfingers, cousin of
Okay.
Tyrone. He said that doctor in Florida said children don't need to get the COVID vaccine, and he's the Surgeon General. So I'm going with what he says and not vaccinating little Tyreek Twitterfingers.
Got it. Well, it's good to know that
I
the
don't
legacy
know.
of the Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Bell. Break it down. talk to Tony Twitterfinger.
I will. Well, thank you. And I was just going to comment that it's good to know that the T lineage is continuing in the Twitterfinger family
With little Tyreek. Tyreek is
with little
bringing up,
Tyreek.
is passing the torch, the e-cigarette
Tyrone,
to little
Tony, Tyreek, Tevin. We got them all.
Tevin,
Tevin.
Tanisha, their sister.
Right. Well, the bottom line is, I hope that Mr. Tony does not, move forward with that advice from the Surgeon General in Florida. He is the same doctor that also promotes unproven treatments for COVID, like hydroxychloroquine, and he's even asked people to stop testing for COVID. So I don't know that he's the best source of guidance. And there are clear economic reasons in places like Florida, specifically states that rely on tourism, to downplay the seriousness of the pandemic. That's what's been going on all along. So what we should remember is that that vaccines for children can help protect vulnerable family members. The way the vaccines work is the more people that receive them, even the healthy people, it cuts down on the spread of whatever you're vaccinating against, in this case, COVID-19. Vaccines also help to protect children themselves. So at the height of the Omicron variant just last month, 700 children a day were being hospitalized. And of the over 1,000 deaths of kids from COVID in the United States, over 60% of them have been children of color. So it affects our children the most. And it appears that policymakers are not really prioritizing our children when they're making these decisions, which appear to be economic in nature. So far, 22 million children have received the vaccine in the United States alone, including 1 million from Florida. and it remains overwhelmingly safe and effective at keeping children out of the hospital and and um and doing well. All the hospitalizations that we've seen of children overwhelmingly have been unvaccinated children.
Wow.
Wow.
So that's the weekly debunk, but I don't want to leave the weekly debunk without saying this, and this is important. We had one of our viewers type in the comments. Tanisha Monique Miles typed in the comments. My grandson was exposed to COVID, returning to school, and now he's having major complications.
Well,
So
we will be
that's
definitely praying for him. And it's important that if it's caught early enough that he receive you know all the treatments that would be appropriate for his age. I don't
Mhm.
know if he's over 12, but some of the antiviral treatments I just mentioned, he might be eligible for. So again, we will keep him in our prayers.
Yep.
So thank you for letting us know about that, Wayne. Thank you, Wayne and Lila, for helping us through the recap and the debunk. We're going to be seeing you very shortly, but first, we're going to talk about our topic for tonight. And that's the fact that not enough communication is happening with young ladies about their bodies. It's often not happening at home and not happening in school. As a result, misconceptions are everywhere. And a lot of times, unfortunately, they're resulting in poor choices and women not feeling empowered when it comes to their sexual health. Because this is Women's Health Month, we're honoring women's sexuality in this show. We're going to get the guys later, right? So start putting your questions in the chat now, because I know you're going to have some, because it's going to be a first come, first answer basis, right? So without further ado, I want to welcome my two incredible guests who are going to help us walk through this topic. Dr. Shelley Glover, MD, MPH. She's a board certified obstetrician. I can't believe I messed that up. Obstetrician gynecologist who specializes in hormone balance, alternative therapy, sexual wellness, and beautification. Welcome, Dr. Glover. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And then we have also Miss Bria Goode. She is a master's in public health, a research manager at IBIS Reproductive Health. She has experience in public health epidemiology, community-based research, and sexual and reproductive health education. She's currently studying to become a full spectrum doula and childbirth educator. Welcome, Bria. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, good. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to start with Bria. So, Bria, you were a peer sex educator in college. What was that job like? And what were some of the common misconceptions that you encountered that young women on campus had about sex or about their bodies?
Yeah, so that was actually one of the most, I think that's one of the highlights of my college career was being a sexual health care educator. And it involved a year-long program where the first semester we took a class regarding the different sexual health topics, condoms, pleasure, sex preferences, how to talk about those things with the community, doing different tabling events, going to different organizations to talk about sexual health, going to different classes. And then the second semester, we developed a program of our own and tried to talk about what it would look like implementing this program on our campus. So for example, my program was called Black Is, and we talked about making a podcast specifically for the Black community to talk about different sexual health topics. It would be Black is Love, or Black is Consent, or Black is Kink, those different types of things. But I had a lot of people come ask me questions during tabling events and during presentations. And I think one of the biggest ones was that people didn't know that there was a female condom. They were very perplexed when we pulled it out and showed how big it was. They said, that goes in there? Wow, that's crazy. Because people only hear about the male condom.
Right.
So it was that. And then also different questions about birth control, what are the different side effects. One of the recent questions I got actually was, what are the side effects of Plan B? Can I take multiple Plan Bs? Does that affect my fertility? Those different types of questions. So we had an array really from a lot of different areas.
Wow, that does cover the gamut. Let's try to hit a couple of those with Dr. Glover. Before actually we get into that, can you give a quick explanation of how the female anatomy is put together? Because I have to admit, one of the reasons that I thought about this for a show idea was I was having a conversation with a 20-year-old, and as I was describing the different reasons that you can have pelvic pain, I mentioned fallopian tube, and she didn't know what I meant. And it dawned on me, wait a minute, there's a disconnect here. So let's start basic, and let's start with just describe the basic working parts of the female anatomy.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we have a little schematic that we can put up of the internal organs, and that may be helpful. Yep, there it is. I hope you guys can see it. I thought that one was probably the easiest to look at. So what you have to do is imagine that you have sliced your uterus or your body in half, and that you're looking at the inside of it. So the part in the bottom where it says vagina, that is the inside of your vagina. So if you put your fingers inside of your vagina, that's what you would feel is like you see it looks like it has ridges, because the vagina actually has something called rugae. And so it makes it feel a little bit irregular, completely normal. That's what you want. And then the nubbin that you feel if you put your fingers in the top of your vagina and hit something kind of hard is your cervix. And that is actually where we do pap smears, because that area is prone to getting precancerous changes of the cervix. And then it's also what opens up when you are having a baby, so that the baby can actually come out of the uterus and be delivered out of your vagina and given to you. The inside of the uterus is actually made up of 3 layers. People think that their ovaries are part of their uterus, but they're not. So the uterus is actually made up of the endometrium, which is the inside portion. You see it's the darker pink. And then the muscular portion is called the myometrium. So the endometrium is the only part of the lining. It's the lining of the uterus. It's the only part that can actually bleed. And so that's where, when you have your menstrual cycle, that's where the blood is coming from. It's also where the baby is once you get pregnant, and that's where the baby is housed until the baby is delivered. The muscular portion that you see, and I don't think I can touch that and show you, but I don't have a pointer, but basically is called the myometrium. That's what contracts to push the baby out when the woman is in labor. It's also which contracts to cause all those lovely, horrible menstrual cramps that you get. Then you see the tubes that go out. That's the fallopian tubes. And so that is actually a conduit. It takes the egg from the ovary, which is once again not part of the uterus. It's attached to the uterus, but it is not part of the uterus. But it takes the egg, which gets released from the ovary, and it takes it through the fallopian tube so that it can meet up with the sperm, and then it can go into the lining of the uterus, the endometrium, and that's where the baby can be. So that's the main function of the fallopian tubes. And when you hear about people getting their tubes tied, that's what happens, is that we put a clamp in the middle of the fallopian tubes to stop that progress, to stop the egg from being able to reach the sperm. The ovaries
Excellent.
are.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, go ahead.
So we heard about that female condom, right? Question. Can you tell us on that diagram, where does that female condom go? How does it work?
The female condom is on the outside. It's a dam. Mm-hmm. So it's actually not on that picture. But
right, but wouldn't it go at the outside of the vagina?
Yes. So it's the outside of the vagina.
Okay.
We have that other picture. If you wanted to pull that up, we could actually that might be a better picture, the external. Yeah. So can we blow that up a little bit? So if you look, so a lot of people do not know the outside of their human vagina as well. It's very interesting. A lot of people think their clitoris is where they urinate from, and so that is not true. So if you look, the very top part where it says mons pubis, that is where usually if you have hair, that's the plumper portion at the top where you can have hair, and then you come down, and the more meaty part of your vagina is called the labia majora, and then you have the labia minora, which is the inner fold of the labia, which is usually a little bit of a either a darker color if you're a darker skinned, or a darker pink. And then you get inside and you see the urethra. That is where you urinate from. So you've got the hole, which is the vagina. You've got the hole, which is the urethra, where you urinate, which is above it. The clitoris is not a hole. It is actually a nubbin. It's the nubbin that sits above. And the clitoris is actually it's a gland. It's actually similar to the male's penis. People think that the vagina is the woman's counterpart to the penis, but actually it is the clitoris, and the clitoris is actually the only body part that's specifically for pleasure. Then if you go down, you have the perineum, which is basically the space between your vagina and your rectum. When you hear about people tearing in childbirth, that's usually where that occurs. And when you hear about people getting sewn up after having a baby, that's where we're talking about usually doing a repair there. And then the anus is basically the opening where you have a bowel movement from. So you have those three orifices: the anus, the vagina, and the opening to the urethra are your three openings down there. And then the dental
Dr. Glover, I have a quick question. So we actually had a question before the show. Someone wanted to know, what about hygiene? Is douching necessary? Yeah.
The vagina is self-cleaning. So the back in the day, which is quite a while now, our parents, so not these young girls' parents, but those that are probably 65 and over, douching was the norm. People had douche bags hanging in their bathroom, and it was considered a normal thing that you did. Then we kind of understood that that's not necessary, that the vagina is not a dirty place. It's not something that has to be cleaned all the time. And douching will not, a lot of people think that they will douche and prevent a infection. It doesn't. So if you have gonorrhea or chlamydia or something like that, douching is not going to treat that. So we do not recommend routine douching. It's not necessary. And also, I'm very not into those Vagisil and whatever else smelly things that you can find that say that you're going to make it smell good. Your vagina shouldn't smell like flowers or
talcum powder.
No. So it should not have a fishy odor. It should not have a strong odor, but that's where just regular soap and water. You do not have to use a Brillo pad. You know?
Right. So Bria, I mentioned, that girls are not getting this kind of education at home a lot of times, and they're not getting it at school. Where do you find that teenagers and young adults are getting their sexual information from?
Yeah, a lot of people are actually getting their information either from their peers or from social media. And we know how social media works. Everything on there is not correct. Research has actually shown that a lot of teens get the least amount of information from their parents. And this can be due to poor self-efficacy, thinking that they won't be able to educate their kids fully on what to expect. It can also think that have poor sexual health outcomes, and they may also think that talking to their kids may make them have sex earlier. But yes, a lot of people learn sexual health from their peers or the media, and not even from schools either, because the thing is, a lot of schools don't have sexual education. I know when I went to school, I was in a Catholic school, and they definitely didn't talk about it. We talked about family life, which went from the baby to teenage years to marriage and then death. Where in there did we talk about sex to get to the baby? The baby's there, So the thing is, like, schools are trying to respect the boundaries of parents, and parents are not talking about it at home. So people are running around trying to figure out where to get the information from. And then as their peers, real life experiences, which can, either go good or bad, and then also social media.
So given all that, Dr. Glover, what are some of the things that you might have encountered in your GYN practice that resulted were health consequences from young women not understanding or even older women not understanding their sexual health?
Oh, There's so many,
Okay.
and I think that
Other than pregnancy.
other than the biggest one, right? Pregnancy, I always tell
Yeah.
people, is the biggest STD. It lasts you for 18 plus years, and but the thing is that I was listening to Dr. Morrison last the presentation last week, and he was talking about sexual empowerment, and I think that especially in the African American community, a lot of times sex is considered for girls a no topic, and that, like you said, like Bria said, that by talking about it, you're going to make them do something they weren't going to do, and that's just not true. Your darling is going to have sex if they want to have sex, and I've seen it's interesting because it's always seems to be the opposite. The moms that drag their daughters in are the daughters that don't want to spell sex, and then the ones that think their little angel couldn't possibly know what to do there
Right.
is sleeping with half the football team. And so it really is, don't assume anything. And if you're not comfortable having the conversation, maybe you have a sister or or somebody else that's close to the family that your daughter gets along with, and let the daughter know, hey, you know what, if you're not comfortable coming to me, then go to Aunt Sue. And I think that that's really important, that they have someone that can help them, because like you said, there's so much out there, and unfortunately pregnancy is glorified. You've got these teen mom shows and all this, teen pregnancy shows and all this stuff, and so people think it's this great thing, and that and then the other thing that's of concern is that, like Dr. Morrison was saying, is that if you make girls think that sex is bad, and that they're a bad girl if they plan for sex, if they have condoms, if they get on the birth control pill, then what happens is that they go out and they have unprotected sex. Because if I have unprotected sex, it means I didn't plan it. It just happened. Blame it on the alcohol, just like Dr. Morrison said when he was talking about men having sex with men. It's the same thing with our youngsters, is that if I don't plan it, then I'm a good girl that just kind of stumbled on something bad. But the problem is that bad can be really bad, and it can be as bad as HIV, it can be herpes, it can be gonorrhea, it can be chlamydia, and it can be pregnancy. And so it's really important that you do talk to your daughters. And if we have single dads, that same thing, you either have the conversation with them, or if that's too awkward, you find somebody else that they can relate to have that conversation, because they're going to have sex, and it's whether or not they're going to be educated enough to know and to treat it with the deference that it deserves, and to understand how to protect themselves, because you can't be there. You can't be there.
Right. So along that line, that theme of empowerment, for Bria, we talked about HIV last week, which is the conversation that Dr. Glover is referring to. If anybody didn't see it, you got to go back and see it. It was an excellent conversation. But our guest, Dr. Morrison, mentioned that many men still don't want to use condoms. So what language would you suggest that women can use to feel empowered around insisting that their partner use a condom?
Yeah, so this actually reminds me of a kind of scenario that we played out when I was a sexual health care educator. And one of the things that we used this conversation with was around the conversation of STIs, which can also include HIV. And so we talked about
what does STI stand for? Sorry.
Yeah, sexually transmitted infections. Thank you
Okay.
for asking. But yes, so for example, let's say you want to go get tested with your partner, right? So you want to frame it in a way where it's like, we're doing this together, we're in this together, and I'm here to support you because I prioritize your health and my health at the same time. So it's like, you can say, hey, babe, I think it's really important for both of us to prioritize our health. I'm very, very concerned about the different infections that may be going around. And I just think that the best way to do it is for us to wear condoms, and the people will say, condoms don't feel the same. I don't want to have a barrier between me and you, things like that. And I think it's really important to be strong in what you want in a sexual partner. And if they can't give that to you, then unfortunately you just kind of have to let them go, and I think it's hard, but you kind of have to. So in that case, I think it's really about putting yourself in the situation as well, because if you try to do it in a certain way, it may seem as if it's a blaming thing, like, oh, you're dirty, as people love to say, or like you think that you don't trust them, but you don't ever want to do that. You want to put a trust in there by saying, I also care about your health, and I want you to care about our health as well. So let's do this together in the best way possible. And that's a condom.
Right. And we talked about the fact that last week that in the Black community, Black women, or just in general, Black women are the group that's seeing the most rapid increase in cases from HIV. But I also saw another statistic that concerned me, that 1 in 6 Black people have herpes. So sexually, I should say sexually active adults,
I was
right?
going to say, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, 1 in 6 sexually active adults who are African American have herpes. So that conversation that you mentioned, Bria, and that's not even to including all the others, syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, etc. You have to figure, if somebody doesn't want to wear a condom with you, that means they're not wearing condoms with other people, right? So again, you mentioned that might be sort of a signal to maybe let them go. The other question I wanted to ask is, can you get sexually transmitted diseases from oral sex? That's for anybody.
Yes.
Dr.
Sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Glover.
No, go ahead. You can go ahead.
Oh, well, the one, I will just say this and I'll go ahead and pass it on to you. Yes, you can. Sex is not siloed to just vaginal and penis sex or vaginal and anal sex. You can also get STIs in the mouth. And the one thing that I will say that surprised me, and I think a lot of people don't know, is that some infections such as gonorrhea and chlamydia are site specific. So in the case that you do get tested through your pee. So for example, you'll pee in a cup and they'll test that for an STI. Just because it turns out negative in that way doesn't mean that it's necessarily negative if they don't swab your mouth. So I add that, then I'll pass it to you, Dr. Glover.
Yeah. So it's less common, with the oral, because our mouth, actually our saliva, and we have a lot of enzymes in our mouth that are designed to kill off things, because, the mouth is just a good barrier. And so it definitely is a much safer barrier than the actual vagina or the anus. The anus is actually the most fragile, because that tissue is just more fragile, period. So way more likely to get infection with anal intercourse than vaginal, and then vaginal more likely than oral. Also, one of the things that, so yes, pick your partners, talk about sexually transmitted diseases, and I always tell my young ones, if you can't have that conversation, then you shouldn't be having sex. You got to be open and being able to communicate with your partners. And I think that one of the things, just to go back to where you were talking about condoms, what I tell my young ones is that a guy, you have to protect your own body. No one else is going to do it. Your mom's not going to be here all the time. And that a guy will tell you that he's a virgin. He could have slept with 20 billion people. He could have slept with half the floor, and he'll tell you that he's a virgin if that's what it takes to get in your pants. Also, if you tell him that he had to put on 3 condoms to get in your pants, he will do it. And so you have to understand that you have that power, and that if you insist on wearing a condom, on him wearing a condom, or you don't have sex, he will get that condom. If he has to go rob the liquor store to get the condom, he will get the condom to put it on, if that means he gets to get in your pants. So don't believe all the hype about I can't get the condom and we don't have any and blah, 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 blah. That's all not true. They will find a condom if that's what it takes to get to the promised land. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that with the sexually transmitted infections, you have to understand that guys always get the better end of the stick, unless we're talking about, say, HIV. And so if guys are not scared of sexually transmitted infections. They think, I'm just going to go get a shot, I'm going to be good. And most of the time for them, if we're talking about gonorrhea or chlamydia, they are going to be good. Whereas the female,
or even warts.
Right, genital warts. They don't see as much as the woman does most of the time. And so you have to understand that the same girl will end up potentially, especially if they don't know that they have something and they allow it to keep going, they could end up in the hospital with what we call pelvic inflammatory disease. They can end up doubled over in the emergency room. They can end up having to be admitted for several days and have to get antibiotics and all this stuff. And they could actually end up not being able to have kids when they want to. They can get infertility from this. And guys just don't have all that. So their scope of understanding is completely different. So once again, you can't rely on your male partner to whatever you want, empathize with you about the risks that go with sexually transmitted infections. So,
Right.
and warts is a whole nother conversation that is actually common. I've seen that. That's devastating. That is so devastating. You would think that I don't see a lot of HIV in my population, but I will tell you, of the things that are just devastating to someone, it's genital warts. I mean, because you can't, if you have an active genital wart infection, you can't hide that. And so it's, the same guy that is dying to get in your pants will do anything to get in your pants. If you have to tell him you have genital warts, he will run to the hills and will also tell 20 different people about it. And so it's a very awkward thing. I mean, luckily we can treat those. So please, if you're unfortunate and you do get them, we will help you with that. Your gynecologist can help you with that. But just know that there's stuff out there like people don't talk about. Genital warts. I mean, people talk about gonorrhea and chlamydia.
And also the fact that the same virus that causes it is associated with cervical cancer. Right.
Yes.
So
yes.
I can't believe that we're already at the time where I have to stop asking you questions and we need to take the audience questions. So Wayne and Lila, please come on back, join us. Let us know what's going on in the chat.
And we're back.
Yeah.
Incredible discussion. Let me say that. And we have a few questions. Lila, you want to start with questions?
Sure. I had a bunch of questions coming into this. So a bunch of people preloaded me with questions. So I'm going to fire them off. First of all,
rapid
Dr.
round.
Shelley, can you break down? This is going to be, I have 3. Can you break down pH balance? I have a follow-up question to that, the pH balance in the vagina. And then does semen disrupt it? And how can we protect it or manage it?
Okay, so basically pH balance, all areas of the body have a pH balance, where it's basically acidity versus alkalinity. And so you want to have you want to have a little bit of an alkaline pH, but not too far the other way. And so that's where we don't want to get into these foreign substances, because they can actually change your pH to the negative. So infections can change it. Chlamydia. Yeast prefers a more acidic. Bacterial vaginosis prefers a more basic. So we want to kind of be more in the neutral area. So just treating infection if you actually have it. Otherwise, leaving your vagina alone. If you are prone to recurrent infections, there are some other things out there that can balance. There's some stuff over the counter. Just be careful, though, about using them.
Probably check with your gynecologist first.
Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's not good. Oh, and then semen.
Yeah.
Semen is more alkaline, and so you'll notice that when you have if you have bacterial vaginosis and you have intercourse and you're not using a condom, then when the semen meets with the vaginal secretions, it'll give off a ammonia kind of smell. And so that's one of the ways that you know that you might have a little bacterial vaginosis if sex is not smelling too good on the other end. And so you definitely see your gynecologist at that point. But it's not a bad thing. Everything in the two bodies are meant to go together.
Okay.
Exactly. So can you just give us a brief understanding or definition of bacterial vaginosis?
Bacterial vaginosis is an overgrowth of the normal bacteria in your vagina. So we're not talking, this is not sexually transmitted. And unfortunately, there are women that have a whole run of them. It does seem sometimes partner linked, but it's not usually. Treating the partner hasn't been shown to help. But there is something about that sperm and the vaginal mucosa and certain partners that just causes recurrent BV. But there are lots of, once again, treatments for that. Just don't overtreat yourself using over-the-counter remedies, because if you're wrong and you don't have bacterial vaginosis, you're not going to get very far. And the same, really more so yeast. Everybody thinks they have a yeast infection. Something's going wrong down there. It's yeast. If you're treating for yeast and you don't have yeast, you're wasting your money, and you can actually create a new problem. You can kill off the normal, once again, your normal pH in your vagina, and you can actually end up with a much bigger problem.
Okay.
I think that's a really good distinction, because so often women think that it is an STI or it is some sort of a different kind of infection, instead of realizing it's just sometimes some normal things that are happening in the body.
Right.
Okay.
Great questions.
So we have a question from Dana Harvey. Are STIs only detectable through testing, and are there signs and symptoms we should be wary of?
Dr. Glover?
Yes. Unless this is a trick question, yes. So you have to actually test for them. You can, we know, like, you can look at discharge and there's odor, and you can kind of say, this looks like it's probably gonorrhea or chlamydia, but that's a physician looking at that. You can't, the average person, you cannot decide what you have. So please, bad odor, bad itching, don't chase discharge. Discharge is normal. But funky odor, itching, or anything like that, lots of discharge. We don't normally have lots of discharge, frothy discharge. You want to get in, you want to get it checked out. Please don't self-medicate, because once again, you don't know what you're treating, and you could completely treat things wrong and create a new problem. The
and
vagina
also
will stop to heal itself.
Right. And also abnormal bleeding and pelvic pain too, or pain with sex when you haven't had pain with sex in the past. All that,
Yes.
all those would also be things to watch out for.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Lie.
Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Yvonne's question, because this is another one of the ones I had in my preload. HPV vaccines, what is it, and why should my little darling get it or not? And also, can you describe the different kinds of HPVs that exist?
Yes, I can. Brie, did you want to go? Did you want to say anything on that, or you want me to take it?
You go ahead and take it.
So HPV is human papillomavirus, okay? And the studies vary, but pretty much 1 in 2 sexually active people. So meaning if you've ever had sex with anybody, the likelihood is that you have some type of HPV. There's up to like 96 different types. Then they have what they call the high risk kinds. Okay. And then even within the high risk, there's still some that are just extremely common in the normal population and don't do but so much damage. So having HPV, please don't panic when your doctor tells you, because I assume pretty much everybody, especially my young people, that they all have HPV. The question is just which one. So then there used to be an HPV-4. Now there's an HPV-9 Gardasil, protecting against the 9 worst types of HPV. The 2 that cause the most, over 90% of pre-cancers, not cancer, precancerous changes to the cervix, which is 16 and 18. It also protects against 6 and 11, which is the ones that cause genital warts, which, like I told you, you do not want to have. And then it protects against some other ones like 40, 45, etc., that can cause precancerous changes as well, but they're not as bad as 16 and 18. And so, same thing with the vaccine. Yes. I mean, I know there are anti-vaxxers out there, and of course we're not going with those people, but for the routine person, your daughter's not HPV. There's so much other stuff out there. So them getting an HPV vaccine does not mean that they're going to go and, be hanging out, on 14th Street in DC. They're not, it doesn't condone sexual activity. My daughter got hers when she was 11. I mean, and I'm certainly not expecting her to be sexually active. So you want your kids to get it before they're sexually active. Right. It's not a cure. It's a prevention. So if they already have the HPV, giving the vaccine doesn't help.
Right.
And it actually might be a good time. It might be a good time to introduce why you're getting them vaccinated. That might be a time to have quote unquote the talk, and start having those conversations. and not thinking of it as just one talk, thinking of it as a series of talks, right? Because you can't cover everything. Just like we can't cover everything in this 1 hour, you can't cover everything in one
Right.
talk, right?
That's right.
Right.
And boys can get vaccinated too. Get your boys done.
Yes.
The
Right.
boys have sex with the
Yes.
girls. The girls can't get HPV unless the boy gives it to them. So
Okay.
Yes.
So we're about to start the lightning round here. And lightning round is we want to keep our answers a little as brief as we can. So this question comes from Deborah Berry. When should teenage girls start going to the gynecologist for annual checkups, discussions, etc.? When should we start having these talks with our teenage girls? Is
Dr.
that
Glover?
Bria or Doc?
Dr. Glover? When do
so
you
definitely by pap smears are now pushed back to age 21, but I recommend that our young ones come in sooner because once again, we're another voice of reason. So we talk about sexually transmitted diseases, we talk about abstinence, we talk about menstrual bleeding, yeast infections, everything. So I like to see them around 16 or if they or when they're sexually active
and
or they're having problems with their periods.
Right. Follow-up question for Bria. When do you think that parents should start to have conversations with their girls about sex?
This is a personal opinion. Anyone who's watching, don't slide in my DMs and try to say anything. But personally, I think it needs to start happening around like 7th, 8th grade, around like 11, 12. Because a lot of people have their first onset of sexual activity is around 15. And that's like sophomore, freshman year of college. So not college, high school. So let's start having it in middle school so we can try to, proactive, not reactive.
Right. And most girls start their menses around then, maybe sometimes even earlier.
Okay. I have a question from a man. Oh my God. So Jonathan Carey says, what are some of the best ways to start that conversation with your partner when it comes to using protection within the bedroom?
Bria?
That's a great question. Yeah. So that's one thing I think I'll say this. I think it's really important to also have that conversation with your kids is about communication and sex preferences. So honestly, it's a conversation that needs to start being had at the beginning. You have non-negotiables, right? So when you sit down and have those conversations about non-negotiables, before you start having sex with your partner, you say, hey, so let's talk about sex right now. Let's not make it taboo. Let's open up the table so we can start talking about it. So honestly, I'm a person that will start talking about it on the first or second date, but not everyone's like that. So I would say as soon as possible before you start your sexual activity, please have those open conversations with your partner.
In other words, don't wait till you're in the bedroom.
No.
Dr. Glover.
And also don't, assume that they have something. I mean, that doesn't sound right, but you know what I'm saying? Like assume that everybody has something. So instead of making it sound like, like you're going to be horrified, kind of say, so what kind of, have you, what sexually transmitted diseases have you had or something like that? Have you had, like try to throw it out. Like it's not that you're not being judgmental, that you expect that there may have been something somewhere along the line that they had. It makes it more normal.
Lie. What you got?
There was a question I saw specifically about orgasms.
Oh, here we go.
Tara, you see it? You got it?
Maria James Frazier or Mario. I can't see. I don't have my glasses on. Are multiple orgasms good, bad, or indifferent during sexual intercourse?
Well, what you think, Mario? I'll throw that question back at Mario.
Maybe the question is, should you expect that a woman is going to have multiple orgasms? Okay. Maybe that's
Maybe.
Okay. I'm just saying what Mario
Dr. Glover?
James Frazier said.
So multiple orgasms, yay. But I think that there are it is much harder for a female to have a vaginal orgasm. Clitoral orgasms are more common. So if you are trying to, Mario, please your partner. You want to make sure that you're actually stimulating her clitoris at the same time, if possible, or or stimulating it ahead of time, not just focusing in on penetration. There are women that can, but actually more common once again after they've had kids as well. So things change based on where you are in life. But don't feel like you are inadequate if your partner is not able to have an orgasm with penetration, because that unfortunately is very common. And I think it goes back to some of the taboos and stuff that we have, especially in the Black community, about don't touch yourself, sex is dirty, sex is bad, and then suddenly you're supposed to be wild and crazy woman. So that's another reason why moms need to make sex more normal. You can still not, there's a way to discuss it without, saying that I want you out there sleeping with the football team.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. What'd you say, Bria?
Oh no, I was just saying that goes back to communication. It's okay to say, can you move your head a little bit? Can you move your hand a little bit? Can we try this type of sexual activity? I have this fantasy. Like, it's literally an open conversation. We don't talk enough about sexual pleasure. We just talk a lot about what goes in and out, and then what happens afterwards. Either STIs, pregnancy, orgasm. We need to start talking about pleasure.
I think we're coming up with a great answer. I think we're coming up. Tracy Walls has the final question. How long does semen remain in the body? I heard it was years.
Oh dear.
Don't laugh. It's a question.
No, it's a
I'm
good
sorry,
question.
I'm
I mean,
sorry.
I had never heard that it was years. I was just imagining, oh my God, years.
That'd be a long
Yeah.
time.
I mean,
long
that
time.
could be to somebody getting married if it's years later. By the
So,
time they
Dr.
get to
Glover,
the new partner.
You want to take that one?
You got me. I don't know. I don't remember. So that was like, I will check it out for you guys and get back to you.
I mean, a semen, contains sperm cells. Cells die, right?
Yeah.
So I imagine if they don't accomplish their mission, they probably die off within 2 or 3 days, because that's around the time that fertilization takes place. So
yeah, I don't want to give out wrong information, so I'll double check it and I'll let you know. But it's not years or anything close to years.
Yeah, it's not anything close to years.
Okay.
Yeah, their cells, they die. Yeah.
There you have it.
All right. Well, this has been just a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Miss Bria Goode. Thank you, Dr. Shelley Glover. Y'all are fantastic. And of course, as always, thank you, Lila and Wayne, for fielding questions from the audience. Thank you, the audience, because y'all had some fantastic questions tonight for our panel. Before I go this evening, I just want to remind everybody that if you're in the Be Health Empowered family, which means if you're listening to the sound of my voice right now, you have the opportunity to enroll in a special research study at Howard University. They've asked me to invite people who listen to the show to participate in a COVID resilience research study. All you have to do is fill out 2 surveys. And for that, you can get compensated up to $100, depending on how many questions you answer. So if you have an interest in finding out more, please contact my assistant, Dana Harvey, at danaharveyresearch@gmail.com. So that's Dana, D-A-N-A, Harvey, Harvey, research@gmail.com. And actually, I have to say, we're only responsible for recruiting about 100 people, and spaces are closing up fast. So please go ahead and reach out to her if you have any interest in participating. So again, thank you all for listening. We're going to be here again next week, right here on Excuse Me, Doctor. And until then, please remember, be wise, be well, and be health empowered. Thanks so much for joining.
My name is Dion Davis. I've tried to live my life with no regrets, but I guess my final regret is not getting vaccinated. Please, don't let not getting vaxxed be your final regret.